All right, that was just awesome. Takes me back the original PlayStation startup. That's right. They did something special for us on the PS5 for the 30th anniversary of PlayStation. And it was pretty awesome. Now, I have heard there's some more stuff, so let's jump in here. As we're jumping in here, though, do me a quick favor. If you're new, hit that subscribe button. And if you enjoy the videos, hit the like button. But we're going to get in here and we're going to check out some of the 30th anniversary PlayStation stuff. All right, so it looks like we got 3 pages to look at here. Celebrate PlayStation's 30th anniversary. December 3rd, 2024 marks the anniversary of the launch of PlayStation 30 years ago. All right, so notice anything different. To celebrate the 30th anniversary of PlayStation for a limited time, we've added a few touches to take you on a journey through PlayStation's history. All right, so we can choose our favorite generation. Celebrate with us selecting a design from one of the previous generations of PlayStation. You can also change it back to the standard PS5 design. All right, well, we're gonna definitely check that out. We'll go into settings. All right, appearance and sound. For a limited time, you can change parts of the PlayStation 5 design based on your favorite generation of PlayStation. Select a design to apply to your home screen and other areas. All right, okay, so we got a couple different ones to choose from here. We have the PlayStation 4, we have the PlayStation 3, the 2, and of course the 1. And then we have the 30th anniversary one that I think kind of encompasses everything. I'm going to go with the PlayStation 1. Appearance and sound. For a limited time, you can change. Okay, so let's get in here and see what it looks like. All right, so check that out. Oops. It's got the PS1 console up there at the top. That's pretty awesome. Some of the other themes. Now, I did not buy the PlayStation 1 at launch. I actually bought the Sega Saturn instead. All right, let's check out the 30th anniversary one, see how that looks. But soon after, I did get a PlayStation. All right, actually, that looks pretty awesome with the. What is. Oh, the triangle. Is that a 3? Triangle 3, O, X, and square. All right. Oh, look at what we got here. We got must see 30th anniversary. Celebrate with us. All right, so this is all just kind of the same highlighted games. We got a sale going here. There's going to be a lot there. I kind of want to check out 1994 PS1 and Crash Bandicoot. That was the awesome early game. I remember playing that, just being blown away. It was a tough game though, not an easy game, but super fun. And then Final Fantasy VII is what really just blew the PlayStation brand up. When that came to the PlayStation instead of the Nintendo console, like every other Final Fantasy game, it pretty much cemented Sony with their PlayStation brand in the video game world. Oddworld, I played all of these games except for Shadow Man. Never really got into that game, but the Oddworld games, loved those. Klonoa, huge fan. Great games on the original Tomba. Great games. Tony Hawk. I mean, that's where Tony Hawk. That was another game that really like pushed it. Symphony of the Night, the best Castlevania game ever made. Well, you can get that for $3.99 right now. That is an awesome price. I highly suggest picking that up. That is awesome. All right, what other? Let's see, 639 for the original Final Fantasy VII. Abe's Exodus, $2.49, and 2.49 for Abe Oddworld, Abe's Odyssey. That's pretty impressive. Definitely highly recommended games from me. All right, but they also released a website, so we'll check that out too. All right, and here we go, the 30th anniversary website. Join us for a series of special events, activities, and giveaways as we celebrate 30 years. All right, thank you for playing. We do have a video here. check this out. See what it shows. A little over 2 minutes long. If you know. All right, so it's showing off all the classic games from the PlayStation Studios. Oh, we got some classic games here. We need a new Uncharted game. I love that series. Ghost. Gran Turismo is another game that really put the PlayStation on the map. FIFA. Oh, there it is. Final Fantasy VII from the original to the remake. Resident Evil. Resident Evil was huge on the system. It was the first place it was at. Tomb Raider, first console version. Actually, that might have been on the Saturn also, but MLB The Show. Let's go. Oh, there was Tony Hawk. There he was. Crash. Metal Gear. Metal Gear Solid. Twisted Metal. So many great games on the PlayStation consoles. Kingdom Hearts. That was a huge launch. Souls games. Was that looked like Bloodborne? That looked like a remastered version of Bloodborne. They're just teasing us at this point. It's on the way. It's got to be. We're getting a Bloodborne remake or something like that. We have to be after that. Thank you for 30 years of play. All right. Well, that was pretty cool. Let's see what else we got here. All right, 30 years of PlayStation history. We can explore the timeline. All right. And it all started with the PlayStation 1. And is it going to, all right, PlayStation 1994. All right, it released in Japan on December 3rd. It released in America on September 9th. And in Europe, they got it September 29th. 30 years ago, our journey began with the PlayStation console launching in Japan on December 3rd, 1994. The first PlayStation console became an instant hit and went on to be the breakout product of E3 95. I miss the old school E3s too. And launched later that year to huge success in North America and Europe. Do not underestimate the power of PlayStation. Oh, look at that Ridge Racer. Oh, I loved that game. All right, let's keep moving. Do not estimate the power of PlayStation. The PS1. I did get that soon after launch. Like I said, I picked the Saturn over the PlayStation, but I was always going to get a PlayStation 2. All right, since launch, the original PlayStation went to sell 102 million units. That's impressive. Changing the game. Parappa the Rappa. Okay, we've been talking about some really cool games, like a Tekken. This game does not belong there. All right, Animal or whatever that Ape Escape is an awful game. I don't care what anybody says. Now, Medieval, awesome game. What was this game called? The jumping game. I can't remember what it's called. I can see the case of it, but I can't think of the name. That game was fun too. All right, 32-bit CPU gives us a little background on it. It was, it did use CDs, which was a huge deal. Tell Dad if you stay home, you can't go look. That's pretty funny. Welcome to PlayStation. All right, what happens if we press this? Oh, we get that. All right, that was fantastic. Brings back so many memories. All right, we'll keep moving on though. So console variations, PlayStation Classic. I have one of those. I think it's not the greatest. I did have both versions of these. I also had the screen for the PS1. Oh, there it is right there. It was pretty cool. PlayStation original controller. Then we got the controllers with the oh, this is the PS1 DualShock. So the analog sticks. They came out with that after the Nintendo 64 came out with the analog stick, and it was kind of like soon after the other consoles added that to their controllers, which was much needed. Different colors. All right, we had the multi-tap there. Yeah, I remember that. Oh, I forgot about the Pocket Station. The mouse. I never did have the flight stick. Memory cards, those became hard to get at one point. There's all these aftermarket ones that were kind of sucked. Laura Croft taking over the world. All right, here we go. Iconic PlayStation games. Okay, Wipeout and Ridge Racer. I played those two games so much. They were such awesome games. Ridge Racer, really cool arcade game when it came home. I was just blown away with the way it looked and everything like that. Wipeout. Wipeout was, if you've ever seen the movie Hackers, it's one of Angelina Jolie's really early movies. They play this game in they go to this nightclub, place that had like an indoor skate park and all this stuff. And there's this game that, everybody plays, tries to be the best at. And it was an early version of Wipeout. Now, it wasn't a racing game. It was like a weird puzzle game type of thing, but it was the early version of Wipeout. And I loved that movie at the time. And when I saw that, I wanted to play that game so bad. So when I found out that that was an early version of Wipeout, that was pretty awesome. Tomb Raider. God, Tomb Raider doesn't stand the test of time. Those tank controls are just, I'm not a fan of tank controls. So I never really I played Tomb Raider, but after playing Super Mario 64 with the analog stick and how smooth, the analog worked for the 3D and stuff like that, it was just hard to go back to those tank controls. And even all the way up to like the GameCube with Resident Evil 4, I just couldn't stand the tank controls. Next up, Parappa the Rappa. I bought that game when it launched. I was really excited about it, and I loved it. I played that game a lot. Really cool game, really innovative. Still not a lot like it in the market today. Resident Evil. I mean, this is the birth of the Resident Evil franchise was on the PlayStation 1, and I mean, it was so cool. I mean, this kicked off the survival horror. Yeah, Clock Tower was, before Resident Evil, but Resident Evil just it really kicked off the survival horror genre, and really enjoyed that game. Crash Bandicoot was the first game I ever played on a PlayStation console, and being a platforming fan, I really liked it because kind of one problem with a lot of platforming games is they try and be Mario or they try and be Sonic or something like that. Crash Bandicoot, it felt fresh, it felt new, and the game was just a ton of fun. Final Fantasy VII just blew us away. It was so much more than what we could have ever expected. The jump from the previous Final Fantasy games to Final Fantasy VII, it was just amazing graphic wise. I know it looks really rough now, but at the time, it was so cool. And it wasn't it was more modern, The previous games in the genre, they were all kind of um not as modern with big cities and stuff like that, the way it was laid out like this. Final Fantasy VII, it was such a great game. Gran Turismo, it redefined what a racing game was. I mean, it was like a library of cars. I mean, there were so many different cars and stuff like that. Oddworld, we already talked about that. Love Oddworld, such a great game. I played all the way through both of the Oddworld games on the PlayStation. Metal Gear Solid. Now, this was another day one. When this game came out, I bought it that day and absolutely loved it. Still one of my favorite games on the console. Ape Escape, like I said, pass. It the game just it has the worst controls. The Psycho Mantis boss. Such a cool boss. Yes, I do remember the Psycho Mantis boss. It would read your memory card, stuff like that, talk about other games you played that were Konami games. It was just such a cool boss fight. All right, so we'll move on to the PlayStation 2. All right, so 30 years of play, PlayStation 2. Get a cool little 2000. So it launched March 4th in Japan. We got it on October 26th here in the US and then November in Europe. And this thing, it was such a huge release. The fact that you could watch DVD movies on it was absolutely huge. That was an easy justification to buy the PS2 because it was actually a really good DVD player on top of being a console thing. And there was a lot of weird stuff around this. There was rumors that terrorists in the Middle East were like buying up all the PS2s because they were such a powerful system. It could control like missiles and stuff like that. All that was just hogwash. That wasn't real. But the system was huge. Now this PS2 is one of the biggest selling video game consoles of all time with over 160 million. It is the biggest selling console of all time with that number. Now, this is a new number that we had never been given before. And so there is some controversy around this. The hardcore Nintendo fans are complaining that they released this number to push the finish line because the Switch is approaching that number of being the best selling console of all time. And I think the last up until now, it was like 140 something thousand or something like that. Now they pushed, or 140 something million. Now they pushed the finish line to 160 million. So there's a little bit of controversy around that. What I will say, my 2 cents on this is the original PlayStation 2s that launched were garbage. They did not work. I mean, I think so. You can check me on this, but I believe I managed a video game store at the time of the PS2 release, and the owner of the stores, he didn't even want to carry it because every single one we sold would come back. They had so many issues, and Sony, I believe, I'm not 100% on this is sure on this, but I'm 90% sure that I remember this happening, is that right before the PlayStation 2 came out, they changed their warranty. So the original warranty was much longer on the PlayStation 1, and when the PlayStation 2 came out, they cut that warranty way down. And, there was a lot of speculation at the time that was because they knew the console wasn't going to last. I think it was probably just a little bit it was a little too early. Like as powerful as that system was, just it wasn't ready for mass production at that time. But the early PlayStation 2s were garbage. We actually hired somebody to work full time repairing PlayStation 2s at the video game store I worked at because we would just I mean, we'd have multiples come in every day. People, hey, my PS2 stopped working. So we hired somebody to repair them, and it became a super big part of our video game store business. Was repairing people PlayStation 2s. And because of that, the owner didn't even want to sell brand new PlayStation 2s. So personally, I had 6 PS2s. And it wasn't like we have 3 Switches in the household. All 3 Switches still work to this day. I still have my Atari 2600 that I got when I was 5 years old, and it still works. My Nintendo 64 still works. Super Nintendo still works. Nintendo, and that had issues. But the PlayStation 2, like instantly, I went through 6 PS2s, and I do not have a working PS2 at this time. I have a lot of parts, but the system just wasn't built great. Now, when some of the later PS2s did work much better, and they lasted a lot longer, but you know, this number is definitely inflated by that. 160 million. That was inflated by the fact that most people had to buy multiple versions of the console if they wanted to play the games because it wasn't a reliable console. So that was kind of a bummer with that system, but that's kind of something you deal with if you're going to build something as powerful as that. I think just it it wasn't ready. If they would have waited another year or so, I think they could have took their time and made a more reliable system. But you know, the video game industry, especially back then, it was all about being first, getting it out first. And the console was awesome. When it worked, it was awesome. It really just blew away the PlayStation 1 in every single way with graphics. The emotion engine was a huge talking point, and the DVDs, being able to play DVD movies was just awesome. And here's the different variants. So the PS2 Slim, that system, if you can find one of those, it probably still works. They were fantastic. No issues with that. It was just that old school, big, blocky one. It struggled. Oh yeah, and the PS2 network adapter. It wasn't the first network adapter on a console, but I did have that. I didn't use it that much. I think mostly that thing was for SOCOM. If you played SOCOM online, it was that was really the game that pushed that. All right, we get to look at some notable games. Star Wars Battlefront, Tony Hawk 3, a lot of sequels. SOCOM right there. SOCOM was huge on there. Final Fantasy 11 was it? I think Final Fantasy 12 was the one that, wow, when that came out, it was crazy. I did not. That's not my favorite Final Fantasy game, but it was a big release for that console, and it did have backwards compatibility, so you could play the PS1 games on the PS2, which was really cool. All right, let's check out the startup menu. I'll be quiet for this. All right, and a lot of people that they think that's the most iconic. I still go with the PS1. The PS1 opening thing was really cool. All right, some iconic PlayStation 2 games. Yep, we got Jack and Daxter, Twisted Metal Black. Absolutely loved it. Played it a ton. Ico, that was a fun game too. I played that. Ratchet and Clank. This is where we were introduced to Ratchet and Clank and Sly Cooper. Both fantastic games. Killzone was so cool. I was like just huge multiplayer online. Just really fun game. God of War was introduced towards the end of the PS2. In 2005, it was Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 initially launched on the GameCube, but they did get it a little bit later on the PlayStation 2, and it was a great version of the game. Shadow of the Colossus just visually would just blew you away with the giant monsters you would fight. It was just super cool. The SingStar Revolution, I never really played that. Now, one of the most iconic gaming franchises in this generation was the Guitar Hero games. The Guitar Hero games were absolutely huge. Oh, and right here, the Buzz Buzzers. I had that game. It was. Oh no, wait. I'm sorry. I did not have that game. The Buzz Buzzers. I had the one on the Xbox 360, I think was the game that I had where each person had their own thing. It was like a game show. And we actually played that a lot. I never did play the one on the PS2. That's interesting. I might have to look into that one. And then we got the camera, which whatever. But the guitars for Guitar Hero. Guitar Hero was so big, so huge. I remember me and my son going to the Nintendo, or not the Nintendo, the um the Power Fest, or not Power Fest, what was it called? World Cyber Games. We went to the World Cyber Games. We both made it to the finals of the World Cyber Games in the US. And we were playing Need for Speed Pro Street. Um, that might have been Xbox 360 era, but Guitar Hero was still huge at the time. And so we got to meet some of the best Guitar Hero players in the world, and watching them play those hardest ones and just getting a perfect on everyone, it was incredible. Just an incredible game. I sucked at that game. I was like one of those people that I had to sit perfectly still, not move on the couch to play it. Whereas my middle son, he'd be walking around the room, swinging around his head, hitting all the notes. I couldn't do that at all. I couldn't move and to play it, but it was still a blast. Love Guitar Hero to this day. If they release a new Guitar Hero game, I'll be there day one. I'll definitely play it. All right. Oh, and we had the PSP. release in this time. We did have a PSP. I kind of got it later in the thing. I got it for my oldest son had a PSP. I never really played much of the PSP. I thought it was really cool, but I just never really got a chance to play it. He played it. There's a ton of awesome games. That's where Loco Roco was a huge release when that came out on the PSP. I remember that. Patapon. There's a bunch of God of War. We had Grand Theft Auto games, and the they weren't the same games as the PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 3. It was kind of a cross-gen system. It wasn't exactly the same as that. It was a little more like just original games for it, and there were some really good ones that I played later on. But when this console was big, I just didn't get that much into it. All right, so we will move on now to the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation Vita. All right, so this is another generation where I was much more. We did have a PlayStation 3. We bought. This is kind of when, I was buying every system the day it came out. So we bought a PS3. The kids mostly played the PS3. I played the Xbox 360 a little more. I was really into Call of Duty at the time, and I played a lot of Call of Duty on the Xbox 360. But we did have a PS3, and once in a while, a game would come out, and I would jump on there and play it. But the console did release in November 11th and 17th of 2006 in Japan, and later the following year in March in Europe. And this is when, they started getting closer to those global launches consoles, and it did play all the past games. It played the PS1, it played the PS2 games. They sold 87 million, which is pretty impressive. It struggled out the gate. Now in Japan, of course, it did well, but worldwide, the was uh, Xbox was winning most of this generation with the Xbox 360. Of course, it kind of runs into that same thing as the PS2 with the red ring of death. A lot of people had multiple. Um, Xbox 360s. I had a ton of them because the dreaded red ring of death, and it was almost easier just to go buy a new console than to get it fixed. And so towards the end, it did surpass the PlayStation 3 did surpass the Xbox 360 to become the better selling console worldwide. All right, this is where they did introduce the X Cross media bar. All right, stereoscopic 3D. I never did check out the 3D on this console. Kind of forgot that it even had that. There was multiple versions. I never had the Slim. I had the or the Super Slim. I just had the standard one. All right. And this thing was a Blu-ray player, and it was a good Blu-ray player. So that was a big selling point on this one. The Xbox went with the HD DVD. Well, that failed miserably. All right, so let's check out the startup screen for this. Definitely not as iconic as the first two. I still think the PlayStation 1 was the best one out of all of them, but a lot of people, you know, they remember that. They have nostalgia for that one. And then we have the different controllers, the six axis. And so this one did have I think it did it. I'm not positive. I think it introduced the gyro controls for a PlayStation controller. And then we had the DualShock 3, which was a fantastic controller. Although I always felt like the Sony controllers, like I was kind of clawed around them, like they were just a little bit smaller. I did prefer the Xbox controllers. They're just a little bit bigger, a little bit more comfortable. My finger, like if long playing games for a long time, like my pinky and next finger would fall asleep sometime using the PlayStation controller just because the controller was just kind of small. We did get the Move motion controls with this console, which we had, and honestly, we never played it. We had the Sports Champion games. I don't even know what other games we had. I think we had the Book of Spells, Harry Potter game, but we Kung Fu Rider. It wasn't great. It wasn't great. It was one of those things we were really excited, when it was announced and seeing the videos, and then it came out. We played it a couple times, and it just went on a shelf. All right, so iconic games. Uncharted, Drake's Fortune. awesome game. Resistance, awesome game. All the MotorStorm games are fantastic. They're just super fun racing games. You can choose between different vehicles and you're racing through the mud, just really good games. Assassin's Creed. Now Assassin's Creed was a huge hit. I wasn't a fan. I didn't really care much for Assassin's Creed. I thought it was kind of slow and boring. Little Big Planet, being a huge platforming fan, when this was coming out, I was really excited. Then it came out, I was a little disappointed in it. I love Sackboy on the PS5, but the early Little Big Planet games, I just never really got that into. Infamous, they need to bring back Infamous. I want an Infamous PS5 game. It is such a fun series. All the games in the series are absolutely fantastic. Then, of course, we got Gran Turismo 5. The Gran Turismo games kept coming. Grand Theft Auto 5. I mean, the game is still selling huge. The game came out in 2013 and it's 2024 and they're still selling new versions of that game. It's an absolute fantastic game. Also, going back to the PlayStation 2, that is where Grand Theft Auto 3 released. That was a huge release for that console. That's one of the things that really just propelled that console. It was the only console that had that game on it, and the first two Grand Theft Auto games were kind of, if you saw them today, you'd think they were like indie style games. They were computer games. They were kind of top down. They did release on the PlayStation 1 later, but weren't the greatest games. Grand Theft Auto 3 totally changed the way Grand Theft Auto games would be going there on out. It was much more realistic, just a really cool game. The old ones were kind of top down, arcadey style, nothing like, but Grand Theft Auto 3 releasing on the PS2, that the console sales just were huge with that. Everybody had to play that game. Now, The Last of Us, I think, man, I go back and forth. The Last of Us may be my favorite first party Sony franchise. I didn't play the game on the PS3 when it initially released. I didn't play it until much later, and I was so disappointed that I had waited so long to play that. I played it pretty close to when the game was coming out on, or the second game was coming out. When the second game was coming out, I kept seeing stuff, and I just wanted to play it so bad. So I played through the first game to get ready for the second game. That was my first time playing it, so I kind of did those two back to back. And the fact that I waited so long to get into that franchise was very disappointed because I absolutely love the Last of Us games. This was one of those games, I owned it. I just never got around to playing it. It was one of those games I bought when it came out, and it just, got put into the library of games that I needed to play, and just never got back to it. All right, so they did introduce the PlayStation Network, the PlayStation Store, PlayStation Plus, PlayStation Home. I remember playing PlayStation Home. It was really weird. PlayStation Vita came out in 2011 in Japan in December of 2011. We didn't get it till the following February, and I never owned a Vita. I've never owned a Vita. I kind of want to go back and try and find one. I don't know how much the price of them have ballooned, but I would like to pick one up. And it was like the PSP. It got just a ton of games, and it got some new games. Gravity Rush is an absolute awesome game. You can play it on your PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, but I believe it was originally a Vita game. And let's see, Persona 4 Golden, I believe that in the US at least, this was a Vita only game too. And I mean, many still say that's the best Persona game ever. But a ton of cool games here. The console was just stacked with great games. Just couldn't compete with the Game Boy. All right. The PS Vita survives the apocalypse. Find out more. All right, let's get past that. All right. So we're going to move on now to the PS4 and the PlayStation VR. And the PS4 was another console. We owned it. I bought it day one. Um, my middle son played it nonstop. He was it was in his room. I never got a second one. I would, bring it out and play it. When Street Fighter 6 came out, I brought it, or was it Street Fighter 6 or Street Fighter 5? I think it was 6. Actually, it might have been 5. When 5 came out, I played a lot of that on there, but for the most part, I played Xbox One. unless something big came out, like Horizon Zero Dawn, Ghost of Tsushima, stuff like when those games come out, then I'd pull it out and I'd play it. But for the most part, my son was, I mean, he played this thing 24/7. We still have our original one that we got too, and it sold 117 million copies. Pretty impressive. All right, there was a few console variations. So we did have the original and we had the Slim. Didn't have the Glacier White Slim though. That thing looks awesome. All right. And then they did release the special edition version of it. That one looks really cool with the 1994 original PlayStation colors and design. That was really cool. They did do that again as part of this 30th anniversary. You can get the PS5 special. They're probably going to show us that. The controller, they introduced the kind of the touchpad screen here with the PlayStation 4, which actually is pretty cool. Mic and speaker, light bar. Welcome to okay, we'll watch the PS4 opening. Uh-oh. No, no, it won't play it. What is this, a PS2? All right. Well, I guess we're going to skip that one. It's kind of like the PS3. It's just kind of whatever. All right. So, but let's look at some of the iconic games. I never played Resogun. Honestly, I don't even know what that is. But I mean, I'm gonna have to find it. I'm gonna have to find it and play it now. Playroom, eh. Killzone, awesome, awesome game. That was kind of the death of Killzone, that game. It was the last one we got. But Resogun, one of the most acclaimed launch titles of the PlayStation generation. I might have to check that out. I remember what Concrete Genie on this console. What was the one? Knack. Knack was one of the big launch games. I played that one. Lost Guardian, Bloodborne. We discussed Bloodborne earlier. I've never played all the way through Bloodborne. I kind of missed it when it originally came out, and I tried to play it recently, and it's just the graphics are so dark and muddy. It wasn't that enjoyable. So I decided to hold off. I expect this was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I expected to have a remake of this game by now, and we still haven't gotten it. But hey, at the end of that PlayStation trailer, it sure looked like they were working on a Bloodborne remake or something. So hopefully we get that. Infamous Second Son, I played all the way through that game. Absolutely loved it. Highly recommend playing. All the Infamous games are good. Second Son, I really enjoyed. Uncharted 4 is my favorite Uncharted game in the series. And it's right there is probably my favorite games. The Sony first party games would be The Last of Us, God of War, and Uncharted. Those three. I do like Horizon Zero Dawn. I played through that, played through Spider. I did everything in the first Spider-Man game. But Uncharted 4 was such a fantastic game. I wish they'd make a new Uncharted game. Ghost of Tsushima, God of War. I mean, we're just banger after banger after banger. I mean, awesome games here. And yep, Fortnite launched during the PlayStation 4. All right. And the PlayStation VR came out in 2016, and I never got the PlayStation VR. Unfortunately, now I've had some issues to where I don't do well with VR. We have a MetaQuest 2, and I can't really play it. Growing up, I always wanted, to play VR, but now that it's here, I may try getting a MetaQuest 3 with the pass through that's all in color and stuff like that. I might try one of those, get one for my son, and I'll give that a shot. But never really played the PSVR 1 or the PSVR 2. All right, so we are going to move on now to the current console and beyond, apparently, with the PlayStation 5 and the VR 2. All right, 30 years of play, PlayStation 5. We do have the PlayStation 5, of course. It released back in November of 2020. I got mine right around that time. I did not get a launch one. I had a few issues getting it. Same with the Series X, but I got them both soon after launch. And no, I didn't get it from a scalper. I refused to do that. I just stayed on the grind and was able to pick one up in store, actually. I got my PlayStation 2 at a store called Fred Meyer's here, or my PlayStation 5, and I got my Xbox Series X at GameStop. All right, but let's take a look here. So we pretty much know, this console, it is the current console. So, I mean, graphic wise, it's beautiful. We've had some great games on it, although a lot of them are on the PS2 also. They did come out with that access controller, which that's pretty cool. I like to see them doing stuff like that. The more people that can play games, the better. Astro's Playroom is a must play on the console. Sackboy, I had a blast with it. Ratchet and Clank, had a fun time with that. Returnal, I played that a little bit, didn't get too much into it. God of War Ragnarok was one of the best games of all time. Gran Turismo 7, didn't really get into it. Horizon Forbidden West, great game. Played through that. Elden Ring, absolutely loved it. I did play it on the Xbox instead, though. But I mean, it's fantastic any way you go. Spider-Man 2, I didn't. I own Spider-Man 2. Now, Spider-Man 1 and Miles Morales, I played all the way through those games, beat them. Spider-Man 1, I did just about everything you could do in that game. Spider-Man 2, for some reason, I just haven't gotten into it. I've played it a little bit. I'll pop it in every once in a while, play a little bit more, but it just hasn't drawn me in like the second game did. Baldur's Gate 3, I passed on. I know everybody loves that game, but I'm just not the biggest fan of that style of game. So it's just at some point I'll probably try it just because I feel like I need to. Helldivers 2 is another game that I haven't really played much of. I really want to, but I just haven't gotten time to. Astrobot, I mean, it's my PlayStation 5 game of the year this year. I love that game. I played all the DLC. We've actually played the regular game as well as all the DLC here on the channel. So I'll link I'll link I'm not sure which one, but I'll link one of our Astrobot videos at the end of this one so you can check that out. Absolutely love that game. And PlayStation Plus did get an upgrade and some huge price hikes. So, I mean, we're getting new stuff on it. We do have a PlayStation Portal in the house. My son uses that. And the system ended up being a lot better than I thought it was going to. I was kind of skeptical at first, but my son plays it all the time. He takes it to his friend's house when he goes over to spend the night so that they can play Fortnite and stuff. And it works pretty good. And there it is right there. We did get the special PlayStation 30th anniversary collection. And man, it all looks fantastic. They also actually released a 30th anniversary of the Portal too, which it does not show there, but it actually just shows. I'm not sure if that's the Pro or the Slim, but there is a Pro, a Slim, Portal, and then the two different controllers, all 30th anniversary. They got that cool gray look. They got some 30th anniversary branding, and they just look really, really good. All right, so 2023 PSVR 2. I I'm probably not going to get a PSVR 2. I mean, maybe at some point if it drops in price, I'll get it for my son. But the Meta Quest is just such a great great, you know, price for a VR unit that's kind of what we've gone with. All right, well there you have it. All right, gamers, and there you have it. A little reminiscing about PlayStation, and hey, here's the years and years of more PlayStations. We'll be buying the PS6 when it comes out. We'll be playing the new iterations of games like God of War. I've heard they might be go back and redo some of the older God of Wars. That would be awesome. I love the first three God of Wars on the PS2 and the PS3. Those games were awesome. A lot different than the modern ones if you haven't played them. More hack and slash. Really good games though. And hey, I hope we get another Uncharted game. We know we have heard that there is a new The Last of Us game in the works. Can't wait for that. I will definitely be play it. But hey, I want to thank you guys for kind of joining us as I reminisced about PlayStation over the years. Hopefully, here's to another 30 years. Joe's World out.